Many years have passed. The world is in shambles. Despite it all, time has lost all effect on me. How exactly did it end up this way? Well, that's for you to find out.
Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and I already hear you asking, Meli, where have you been all this time? Well, I'm happy to announce that I picked up a brand new hobby while I was away. Gambling! Now, my funds may be in the red right now, but I spent all of my winnings on this cool clock. Well, time really is on my side right now, huh? And speaking of time, today, we're talking about time skips. In media, a time skip is a narrative technique that skips over a significant amount of time in a story. Typically, a time skip will occur after a major shift in the story or in a character's development, in order to showcase a drastic difference in personality, power, location, and more. While it's pretty obvious for some shows that time skips are used usually for ratings traps in order to draw in some viewers after being in a funk, other shows have no choice and naturally build up to it. Sometimes there's nowhere else you can go in the story without jumping forward in time in order to change the characters in a drastic way in order to push for new story opportunities and dynamics. A time skip also has the power to shift the tone of the entire series and, if done right, can completely outclass its predecessor in terms of star power. While they're not as common in Western cartoons as they are in Eastern anime, time skips still do happen here and have become more frequent in recent years. So today, I wanted to take a look at the strange world of time skips in animation and some of the tropes that come with them. Let's start out with one of the more famous examples of time skips here in the States, featured in Rugrats. In 2001, Rugrats held a special event on Nickelodeon to celebrate the series' 10th anniversary, the All Growed Up special. This hour-long special was a big deal back in the day and explored what the babies' lives looked like in the future for the first time in the show's run. More specifically, it aged everyone up by a fitting 10 years, making the babies preteens and putting them in scenarios fitting for that demographic. The special ended up becoming Nickelodeon's biggest outing even today, drawing in over 11 million viewers. Even those iCarly specials couldn't reach the heights of these babies growing up. So, of course, this success pushed Nick to greenlight a full series featuring these new preteen Rugrats, titled All Grown Up. And people fucking hated this shit. Watching those cartoon review channels as a kid and even asking people my age back in the day showed that a lot of people thought that All Grown Up took away from what made Rugrats special. It changed the characters too much. It made it just another generic kids in school show like Hey Arnold or As Told by Ginger, etc, etc. I personally never thought that when I watched it as a kid, and although I might be a little biased here because I have a confession to make. I think Rugrats is really boring. I don't know, I just never could get into it as a kid. Don't get me wrong, I loved the movies. Even if the third one was a little less good than the first two, I watched all three of them to death growing up. I even had one of those, like, fairy tale spin-off DVDs, and I would watch All Grown Up on Kiss Cartoon all the time. But for some reason, the original show just bored me to death. They would air it on Teen Nick constantly, and I would give it a chance. Multiple chances, in fact. But I don't know. I'll have to give it another chance one of these days. I'm sorry. Going back to the point, most people did not like All Grown Up. I'll even recognize that it was an entirely different show. But then again, what did people expect? For these characters to still act like toddlers 10 years later? No matter what you think, you gotta admit, it's pretty cool seeing these characters have fleshed out conflicts and interactions and, well, you know, speak proper full sentences. In particular, something I like that this show does is give the movie characters Dill and Kimmy things to do and opportunities to shine, where in the OG show, they only really had relevance in their respective movies. At the end of the day, All Grown Up is a pretty good gold standard for time skips in Western animation, much like how Rugrats was the blueprint for cartoons throughout the 90s and 2000s. And while we might not all agree on the quality of the OG and All Grown Up, we can all admit that it's better than whatever the reboot was cooking. Seriously, how the hell do you age down Susie, remove her from Angelica, and not give her someone to bounce off of? And then later on, you introduce Kimmy, age her up, and remove her from Chucky? Terrible shit. Just terrible. Huh? What's that? They're doing a live-action Rugrats movie? With CGI babies? Man, these damn 2020s, I swear. For Nickelodeon, the Rugrats time skip is definitely the most notable one. The network didn't really dabble in these again until their revival trilogy in the late 2010s, particularly in Hey Arnold the Jungle Movie and Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling. Both revival movies pick up where their original series left off, with Jungle Movie seeking to solve the major cliffhanger of Arnold potentially finding a way to save his missing parents, and Static Cling seeking to show what happened after the gang got launched in space. These are two different stakes. Static Cling decides to go full meta with it, with there being a huge 20-year time skip and Rocko and crew having to pull up in the modern day with cell phones, computers, and even new social commentary with an older character from the show being transgender. Trans rights, by the way. Really bold of this movie to do this, by the way. This came out in 2019 and should have been monumental progress in representation had they not shadow dropped the movie on Netflix 2 years after the movie was supposed to air on Nick. You know, I thought they had just put it on Netflix after the Jungle Movie didn't do as well as they thought it would do on the channel, but I see you, Nickelodeon. Time skip wise, I think it's really funny that almost nothing changes about our main characters, and it's really just used as a device to shove Rocko in our modern age. A lot of commentary comes from it, and it's a pretty good excuse for a show like this to pull a time skip. Very clever of Rocko's modern life to have a movie 20 years later showcasing the new modern. The Jungle Movie does something similar with its modern technology, although it raises more questions than answers. See, the original Hey Arnold series took place in the 90s, with stuff like beepers, payphones, etc., while the Jungle Movie decided to jump to modern day, with kids having cell phones and the internet, and Big Bob's beepers going out of business. And yet, the time skip in-universe is only roughly 2 years, with the kids going from the 4th grade in the OG series to the summer before their first day of 6th grade. So, how did we get this huge technological jump in just 2 years from the 90s? And then they want to go and say that Helga was actually filming a lot of the older episodes with a video camera the whole time, which I call bullshit, because how did we have this tech in the 90s, bro? Oh, and the time skip itself is pretty cool too, I guess. I don't know. Every character got updated designs, and all of them are very welcome. Especially Phoebe and Gerald's. Like, they gave them some threads. The designs feel modernized, but at the same time retain the charm the original character designs have. They feel like outfits kids from 2010, 2011 would wear. And while the technology and release date of the movie make this set place in 2016, 2017, I'm glad this movie still has a blend of everything before. These characters are still very 90s, early 2000s, but they rock early 2010s threads and late 2010s technology. It wouldn't make sense on paper, but it's all very natural coming from the original series. Honestly, while we're talking about it, let's discuss time skip designs. Time skip designs are very hit or miss when it comes to outfits, and more often than not, they're a miss. Just look at the One Piece cast. Like, they went from stunning to making me want to gouge my eye out. OKKO has an episode making fun of specifically this, where the powers are lamer, the designs are lamer, and overall it's not good for anyone. And for some reason, when redesigning the main characters for a time skip, typically what the designers do is just throw a jacket on them and call it a day. Obviously more goes into it, and I love these designs, but come on, this cannot be a coincidence. Arnold, Steven, Ben, all got cool new jackets for their time skip. Hell, even Luffy and Naruto got some new long sleeve fits for their main designs. You could argue that the long sleeves give a semblance of maturity compared to the short sleeves. It's more formal, makes them feel older, makes them feel more built. Nonetheless, it is such a strange trope, please give me more of it. Speaking of Ben and Steven, why don't we go into their time skips? Cartoon Network really only committed to having time skips for 2 of their shows, being Ben 10 and Steven Universe. I'm pretty sure Ninjago had one too at some point, but I don't really count that show since it's only licensed to be on Cartoon Network in the States and isn't produced by CN Studios. But then again, what even is produced by them nowadays, bruh? For Ben 10, it was monumental back in the day. The original series wrapped up, and not even a week later, a continuation of the series released. Set 5 years after that original summer, Ben 10 Alien Force is a lot darker than the original show. The characters have matured, and it leans heavily into the animated DC show vibe rather than a Saturday morning cartoon, akin to the original Teen Titans and Young Justice. And when I mean darker, I do mean darker stories. Like, bro, they had Ben Tennyson having a morality conflict with Kevin 11 and having to choose whether or not he should kill him after a permanent mutation. And this guy is ready to put him down, no questions asked. I'll be upfront and say that I'm not the biggest Ben 10 fan. In fact, I never saw any of the shows all the way through as a kid, but I would tune in every now and then and see what it was up to. And this arc, crazy even to a non-fan. And then this time skip era of the show got another sequel series with Ultimate Alien, which picked up where Alien Force left off at first, but slowly tried to lean more into the episodic adventures like the original series. Then the time skip got another show, Ben 10 Omniverse, and I remember this is where it lost me as a kid. Looking at it now, it's not the worst looking thing in the world, but the art style change was a huge turnoff for me. It's giving American Dragon on Disney Channel. Instead of seasons, they release 10 episode arcs every now and then, with 80 episodes in total. Omniverse just seems to be the black sheep among the classic Ben 10 shows among fans, but nonetheless, it still continued that continuity that the initial time skip gave. And we all know how this story ends. Ben 10 was rebooted later on to a much worse looking show and took it back to its Saturday morning cartoon roots. And I gotta say, this reboot is boring. Like, this and the Powerpuff Girls 2016 were both airing around the same time, and I gotta say, CN really had these two monumental shows airing back to back. It truly was a monumental era for Cartoon Network. No wonder they're running to the dirt nowadays. The reboot ended with a few movies a couple years back, and they even brought in some of the elements from the time skip, and holy hell, what happened?
Ben 10 is interesting because despite how popular the original series was and how iconic it is to this day, the time skip portion of the series ran for much longer and had a more lasting impact on the series overall. And at the end of the day, no matter how long it ran for or how many series it got, the time skip portion of the series will just never be as iconic as the original run of Ben 10. Overall though, Ben 10 laid the groundwork for time skips and Cartoon Network action shows, and honestly, I can't wait to see what other shows use this plot device.
Only one ever used it. And we all know which one that is! Listen, you all know me. Know how I make my living.
I don't get paid.
I'm the Steven Universe guy. And I think it's a better show than Ben 10. What? Who said that? So, if you haven't heard the story by now, the original run of Steven Universe was canceled because Rebecca Sugar wanted to do the Ruby and Sapphire wedding. They fought for it hard and was even ready to quit the show if they couldn't do it. Eventually, they got the episode Reunited, which might be my favorite episode in the series. Stay tuned for that 4-hour episode ranking. But the show lost its funding because of how unprecedented and monumental this moment was for LGBT representation in, well, everything. The end of an era art book goes into this conflict, and it's honestly really interesting. Steven Universe sacrificed its run to push LGBT representation in cartoons forward, and it's hard to imagine Lumity or any other representation existing without it. After that, the rest is history. The show got canceled, Sugar advocated for an additional 8 episodes to wrap up the story, the network gave it to them, then Sugar advocated for a movie, the network gave it the green light, and then they were like, well, what's the point of having a movie if there's no show to promote? And greenlit more show. Thus, the future era of the show began. Set 2 years after the original series, all enemies have been defeated and the gem war with the diamonds is over. Rather than using a time skip to establish a new big bad or a new goal to work towards, Steven Universe takes an epilogue approach and uses it to tell the audience that, hey, this piece has lasted and this is how we're integrating the gems into human society. The movie kicks off this time skip and really is a last hurrah for the original series tone, as Steven Universe Future, a sequel series set after the movie, is a a different beast in its entirety. Future is a coming-of-age tale with Steven, coming to terms with who he really is. He finally knows for sure that he is Steven Universe, but at the end of the day, who is that person? The show really wants to emphasize that there isn't anyone left to fight, and now the only conflict left lies with Steven. It follows in the footsteps of Ben 10 in darkening the tone for the time skip, but not as drastically. Steven Universe Future still has the same heart and humor at the end of the day, but there are more mature topics to go over as the show grows up with its audience. Speaking of growing up with its audience, that's exactly what Adventure Time did with its time skip. Fiona and Cake, an Adventure Time spin-off that released last year, takes place 20 years after the show's final curtain, and grows up with the audience not only character-wise, but also rating-wise. This is an adult show. The show was pretty good overall, and felt like a proper extension of these characters and how they would be in 20 years. Finn, of course, would be emotionally repressed after Jake's death, and fucking kills things now. Bubblegum and Marcy are taking risks and doing couple things, and it's even implied in Distant Lands that she stepped down as the leader of the Candy Kingdom. And everything they do with Simon in this show is just incredible. What an arc. While you could say Adventure Time has a time skip thanks to this show, there was actually never a big time jump in the series proper. Rather, we got to see these years go by and Finn grow into a man. He's 12 at the beginning of the show, and by the time the credits roll in the series finale, he's 17. We don't miss a beat of his journey, which is incredibly commendable for a show with a big run like this. This, however, is something you could argue is bad with most time skips. With time skips, there always has to be some big shakeup to the status quo that we never get to see, and we just have to accept it. Looking back at Fiona and Cake, yes, Jake died, but how did he die? Did he die in battle? Old age? How did Finn react to it when it happened? Who was there? We completely skipped over his death and the reaction these characters would have to it. Peppermint Butler leads the Candy Kingdom now, but what led to that? How did the world react to PB stepping down? Yes, she's with Marceline, but what do they do now? Are they just a domestic couple? Do they travel the world? With a show like Adventure Time where a beat is never missed, a time skip is extra frustrating because there are extreme shifts in the status quo that would have been interesting to see, especially in a show where the events that do happen are so few and far between. And it's not just Adventure Time either. What do you mean that over the time skip, Lars and Sadie split? Yes, this is intentional and calls out the flawed storytelling rule that Steven Universe had from the very beginning, that Steven had to be present in every episode, but you mean to tell me that you're gonna dedicate so much of the show's run to these two and not show us the ending to their story? Come on! Would have loved to see that, as well as literally how we restructured Gem Society. We skipped all of that in the show proper and only dabbled on it in a mobile game. Thanks, show. What do you mean Pumpkin died during the time skip, and the last time she's relevant on screen, she's extremely off-model? This issue is prevalent in anime as well. One Piece had a time skip of 2 years, and during that time skip, there were huge shakeups in the world, like Blackbeard gaining control of Pirate Island, Kobe becoming a hero, Robin hanging out with the Revolutionary Army, and more. But we never got to see that, and we still haven't 600 chapters later! Or what about Dragon Ball, where 90% of the side cast just disappears for no reason after the time skip, and we're just supposed to live with it as the show transitions away from a comedy and more into a hardcore shonen.
That's what's weird about time skips. Not only does so much happen during that time that we don't ever get to see more often than not, but most of the time the tone shifts so hard in one direction that we end up losing the original charm that the series initially had. One Piece, Dragon Ball, and even Steven Universe to an extent all ditched the goofier aspects of the show and became something entirely new by the end of it.
Dragon Ball was originally conceived as a comedy with fighting elements, and in the Z portion of the show, we're blowing up planets, defeating space emperors, and pulling the whole universe into the brink. And by Dragon Ball Super, we're talking gods and multiverse. One Piece is just not as funny after the time skip and loses the charm of having to outsmart a Devil Fruit user in favor of Haki, which, I'm sorry, it's just not as charming or interesting as Luffy having to find the weakness of Crocodile or Enel. Instead of that, now he's just punching extra hard. Wow, I miss when Zora was funny and when Usopp and Robin had melanin. However, a great example of this benefiting a show would be Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan was already a dark show, but season 4 in particular takes place 4 years after the bombshell revelations of the truth of the world. Whatever lightheartedness in the tone is gone this season, and it proved that by killing off a particular character. Sasha. Sasha is the comedic heart of the show, and her death is the show quite literally killing off its comedy. This portion of the story warrants it, and as much as I loved this character and was upset by her death, it's an example of masterful storytelling. It takes a lot of commitment to pull this off, and Attack on Titan fully commits to its new tone and setting. There's no crazy change in power scaling either. Everything flows naturally, and the final battle utilizes everything that we already knew before. That said, we still don't get to see much of the 4 years that were skipped, and we lose however many of these light moments we had left. Maybe that's why there are so many shows that don't want to commit to a time skip, and only dip their toes into the concepts for one episode. Phineas and Ferb famously did this in Act Your Age, which shows what the gang is like 10 years in the future, with everyone leaving for college. It's a very good episode, pretty emotional too, but I understand why the show wouldn't want to ditch its entire status quo for it. As much as I would want to see more of their adult lives, I'm here for this summer. I want to see how this summer ends. Though, apparently in the new season we're going to be jumping forward a lot to them as adults, so that'd be pretty interesting. Craig of the Creek did something similar with Craig to the Future. It's a typical, this is what you kids will be like in the future episode, and it's really cute. But something cool with this time skip episode is that it plays a key role in the series' final arc, with Craig being concerned that he and his friends will drift apart when they're older, like they're shown in the episode. One of the most famous examples of a one-off time skip would have to be the Simpsons episode Holiday of Future Past. This episode is famously regarded as a great series finale for the show, since it brings everything full circle back to Christmas like the first episode, and has a strong emotional core with Bart and Lisa. However, we've yet to talk about the biggest trope when it comes to time skips in animation, and that is a time skip, but only in the final episode. It's almost a cliche at this point for cartoon finales to end with a time skip, as the show doesn't want to fully commit to it, whether it be a fear of breaking off from what makes the show good already, or networks restraining them from progressing these characters past whatever episodic point they have to be at. Bluey, Regular Show, Arthur, OKKO, Amphibia, The Owl House, and more all end off with a big time skip, showing a glimpse of what the characters' lives are like 10, 20, 30 years down the line. This cliche is a little infuriating sometimes, as it basically teases you with a premise that would be entertaining to see within the show, but there's no time to do so as it's all over. It could also be seen as a wonderful send-off, with it showing us that even though this is the end, our characters are well off in the future, and they're gonna be okay wherever they end up.
All in all, the world of time skips in animation is strange, to say the least. It's inconsistent, it's infuriating because so many important events end up getting skipped, and sometimes it just makes things in the story worse. And yet, it can also be exciting. It's almost like meeting these characters for the first time again. Earlier, I dogged on One Piece's time skip, but some context is kind of needed for that because the entire Straw Hat crew out of commission for like 100 episodes. So maybe that's why shows tend to do these time skips, in order to give us that rush again of meeting these characters and seeing this world for the first time again. That and money.
And that's the story. What? Were you wondering what happened to my eye? Or why I'm at a cemetery? Well, wouldn't you like to know? Consider this my time skip. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna continue to pose dramatically here. Take care now.